Ladies and gentlemen, today I want to speak to the part of you that carries burdens invisible to the world, the fears that wake you in the night, and the worries that whisper lies in your ears. I am here to remind you that there is a power far greater than your struggles, a love that can lift you from your deepest anxieties. Today, we will learn how to stop worrying and place our lives fully in the hands of God, trusting that He will guide us with wisdom, peace, and unwavering grace. Worry is a subtle intruder. It does not announce itself with noise or thunder. It tiptoes in softly, like the rustle of wind through half-open doors. It makes itself at home in the quiet corners of our minds, rearranging our thoughts without permission. It feeds on uncertainty, it grows on fear, and it thrives in the soil of doubt. It whispers, what if, until the melody of faith becomes a faint hum beneath the roar of anxiety. We begin to live inside those whispers, and in doing so, we forget that peace was once our natural state. Peace, like a river, once flowed freely within us, but worry builds dams across it, slowing its current, muddying its waters. We think we are protecting ourselves by worrying, but in truth, we are imprisoning ourselves behind walls made of our own imagination. We call it preparation, we call it caution, we call it care, but it is still the same thief dressed in softer names. It steals our peace, our sleep, our joy, and most of all, it steals the simplicity of the present moment. When a person worries, the body is in one place, but the mind runs to another. The heart beats here, but the thoughts are far ahead, lost in a maze of possibilities. You are having dinner, but not tasting your food. You are sitting among loved ones, but not hearing their laughter. You are breathing, but not living. This is what worry does. It detaches us from now. It blinds us to what is by making us obsessed with what might be. In that state, even blessings appear fragile. Love seems uncertain, and success feels temporary. You cannot build a peaceful life upon the unstable ground of worry. You cannot see your purpose clearly through the fog of endless questions about tomorrow. Every great vision becomes distorted when viewed through the lens of fear. Worry pretends to be productive. It makes you feel busy inside, as though something is happening. You pace the floor, you replay conversations, you scroll through memories, you make plans and discard them. But when all is done, nothing has changed except your exhaustion. You have spent precious energy on invisible battles. You have built castles of fear and watched them collapse in the same breath. Worry does not move mountains, it only weighs you down. It takes from your spirit what faith could have multiplied. It is like watering weeds instead of flowers, feeding that which will choke your own growth. I have seen strong people crumble under the quiet pressure of worry. I have seen mothers whose eyes stay fixed on what might happen to their children and never see how beautiful their children already are. I have seen men who work hard yet never rest because the thought of losing what they've earned haunts them more than the joy of having it. I have seen dreamers stop dreaming because they feared disappointment more than they desired fulfillment. And I have seen worry disguise itself as responsibility, as love, as ambition. But behind every disguise, it is still a thief. It steals your presence, your purpose, your connection to the divine flow of life that is always moving, always sustaining, always whispering. Trust peace is not found in the absence of challenge. Peace is found in the presence of surrender. To surrender is not to give up, but to give over, to hand the heavy load to the hands that can carry it better than yours. Worry makes you believe that if you stop holding everything, it will all fall apart. But faith teaches that when you let go, you make space for grace to enter. You open your hands not in weakness, but in readiness to receive. The opposite of worry is not indifference. It is faith wrapped in calm understanding that you are not alone in your struggles, that there is a rhythm to life bigger than your control, that every step you take is guided by something wiser than your fears. When worry sits on your shoulders, it bends your posture toward the ground. You start to look down more than you look up. You forget the sky exists. But lift your chin, even for a moment, and the vastness above you will remind you of proportion. The things you worry about, in the grand scale of eternity, are small, fleeting, dissolving in time's great ocean. What seems unbearable now may tomorrow reveal itself as a lesson, a redirection, a seed of strength. Worry tells you it is all ending. Faith tells you it is all beginning. Worry clouds your purpose by shrinking your horizon. It convinces you that your life's mission must wait until the conditions are perfect, until you feel safe, until every question has an answer. But purpose is not born in comfort. It is born in the courage to move even when the path is uncertain. You were not placed on this earth to live half alive, waiting for every fear to subside. You were placed here to shine through the storm, to learn that clarity comes after the first step, not before it. The more you worry, the more your imagination works against you. That imagination was meant to create beauty, to envision new futures, to heal, to build. But worry turns imagination into a weapon. It paints pictures of failure and heartbreak so vivid that they feel real. You live inside those pictures until you forget that you are the artist. You forget you have the power to repaint the scene with hope, with faith, with gratitude. Gratitude, yes, because gratitude dissolves worry the way sunlight melts frost. You cannot be deeply grateful and deeply worried at the same time. When you focus on what is working, on what is good, on what has already been provided, your soul expands. And in that expansion, worry loses its grip. Peace requires practice. It does not arrive by accident. It must be chosen again and again, in small moments when the heart begins to race, when the mind starts to spiral. It must be chosen when uncertainty looms and when fear whispers your name. Peace is not passive. It is an active discipline, a holy defiance against the chaos of the world. To choose peace in the midst of turmoil is to declare that your spirit is stronger than your circumstance. To choose peace is to remember who you are beyond the noise, beyond the doubt, beyond the stories that worry tells. It is to return home to yourself, to that quiet place inside where God's voice still speaks, saying, "Be still." Worry clouds your purpose because it replaces divine timing with human impatience. It tells you to rush what must unfold. It makes you dig up the seed before it can sprout, checking again and again if it's growing. But life has its seasons. What is meant for you is not delayed, it is developing. When you worry, you interrupt that sacred process. You question the gardener before the garden has bloomed. And in doing so, you rob yourself of wonder. Purpose is discovered in patience, not panic. Every chapter of your journey has a reason, even the pauses, even the silence. The caterpillar may not understand the cocoon, but the butterfly will. When you surrender your worry, you allow transformation to take its course. Many people wear worry like armor. They think it protects them from disappointment. If I worry enough, they say, I will be ready for anything. But worry is not armor, it is weight. It does not shield, it suffocates. It closes your heart to joy even before sorrow has arrived. It makes you live every possible loss twice, once in imagination and once in reality. The mind tells you that worrying will keep you safe, but the spirit knows the truth. It keeps you small. You cannot rise while gripping fear in both hands. You cannot climb while clinging to every what if. To step into your purpose, You must be willing to travel light. You must release the heavy bags of yesterday's regrets and tomorrow's predictions. Only then can you move freely toward what is calling you. Peace is not loud. It does not announce itself with applause. It enters quietly when you make room for it. It lives in the breath between thoughts, in the pause between heartbeats. To find it, you must slow down long enough to listen. You must choose silence over noise, presence over distraction. The world will always give you reasons to worry. The news, the deadlines, the losses, the endless comparisons. But peace is found not by escaping the world, but by standing centered within it. It is the ability to say, even here, I am safe. Even now, I am guided. Even when I do not understand, I trust your purpose is too precious to be buried beneath worry. You were given gifts, talents, a voice that no one else has. Every time you doubt yourself, you delay the healing your presence could bring to others. Worry blinds you to your own power. It tells you that you must wait for permission to begin, that you must earn peace through perfection. But peace is not earned, it is remembered. It was yours before fear entered. It is the birthright of every soul that knows it was made by love. When you walk in that truth, worry loses its authority. You begin to see that every problem has its season, every pain has its lesson, and every waiting time is working in your favor. I have learned that worry cannot coexist with faith. One must bow to the other. When faith rises, worry fades. When worry reigns, faith hides. But faith does not disappear. It waits for you to call it back. It waits in the quiet corners of your spirit, whispering, trust me again. And when you do, when you release the endless need to control, to predict, to fix, you feel lighter, the air tastes sweeter. The heart beats with rhythm again. Life begins to move with grace instead of strain. You start to notice beauty where before you saw only problems. You start to act from vision rather than from fear. This is how peace restores your purpose. It brings your energy back to the present moment where creation happens, where healing begins, where life truly lives. When you stop feeding worry, you start feeding possibility. Every thought you free becomes a space for inspiration. Every doubt you release makes room for divine guidance. The same mind that once built prisons of fear can build bridges of hope. The same imagination that once pictured disaster can now envision success. This is the transformation that happens when peace returns to its throne. And though the world may still be uncertain, you will no longer be shaken by every wind. You will move with calm assurance, knowing that your purpose is clearer when your spirit is still. You will understand that peace is not the absence of storms, but the confidence that the storm will pass, and you will still be standing, stronger, wiser, freer. There comes a point in every life where the weight of what we carry begins to press too heavy upon the shoulders. The plans we made, the fears we feed, the people we try to fix, the mistakes we replay in the quiet hours of the night, all of it piles up like stones in the soul. We walk around smiling, pretending to be strong, but inside we are aching from the burden. We tell ourselves that we can handle it, that we just need to try harder, work longer, pray faster, think smarter, love deeper. But the truth is that no human heart was designed to hold everything. We were never meant to carry the full load of life alone. There is a divine rhythm to existence, a flow that moves through everything, and when we resist it by clutching control, we suffer. When we release it and surrender, we are lifted. Surrendering to God is not giving up, it is giving over. It is laying down the impossible weight and saying, Lord, this belongs to you now. It is choosing rest over resistance, faith over fear, and peace over pride. There is a strange pride hidden in worry, a belief that we can solve everything if we think long enough, if we push hard enough, if we just find the right formula. But surrender asks us to do the opposite. It asks us to loosen our grip, to stop wrestling with what only divine hands can hold. It is an act of humility to say, I cannot do this alone, but it is also an act of power, because when you surrender, you connect to a source far greater than your strength. The universe was not made to rest on your understanding. The sun rises without your command. The tide comes and goes without your schedule. The wind moves through trees without your instruction. So why must your soul believe that it must control its every tomorrow? Surrender is remembering that God has been managing the world long before you arrived, and He will continue long after you are gone. It is trusting that your small story is part of a grand design, that even the broken pieces fit somewhere in the mosaic of divine purpose. The mind will resist surrender because it loves certainty. It wants to know, to predict, to plan. It wants to hold the map and control the route. But faith has never worked that way. Faith is the courage to walk without seeing the end. It is the gentle knowing that the hand guiding you is steadier than the storm around you. When you surrender to God, you are not stepping into nothingness. You are stepping into divine assurance. You are placing your burdens in hands that can bear them without breaking. And in doing so, you begin to breathe again. You begin to see that control was never peace, only illusion. Peace comes when you release the illusion of control and rest in the certainty of divine wisdom. Every moment you surrender, the chains of anxiety loosen. Every prayer of letting go frees another corner of your heart. Surrender is not for the weak, it is for the wise. It takes great strength to release something that once made you feel safe. It takes courage to admit that you do not know the outcome, but trust that it will be good. The ego says, hold on tighter. The spirit says, open your hands. And in that opening, miracles begin. There are doors that only open when your hands are empty, blessings that only flow when you stop trying to force them. Some of the greatest breakthroughs in life come not through effort, but through surrender. Because surrender aligns you with the rhythm of grace. It tells the universe, I am ready to be guided. I am ready to be healed. I am ready to stop carrying what was never mine. We carry so much that doesn't belong to us. The guilt of others, the expectations of the world, the need to prove ourselves, the regrets of the past, the fear of the future. These things are heavy, and they are not ours to keep. God did not ask us to solve every problem or fix every person. He asked us to love, to trust, to walk in faith. When you surrender, you are not abandoning responsibility. You are aligning responsibility with divine order. You do what you can with honesty and love, and you leave the rest in God's care. That is where true power begins. Because when you stop trying to control everything, you free your energy for what truly matters. You stop wasting your spirit on what is beyond your reach and start nurturing the light within your reach. That light, when tended with faith, begins to shine bright enough to illuminate the next step. Surrender does not mean life becomes easy. It means you stop fighting against what is. It means you learn to float instead of drown, to bend instead of break. When you release your struggle, the waves that once threatened to sink you begin to carry you. God's current is always flowing. It is only our resistance that causes suffering. You were not born to fight the river. You were born to trust its direction. Some days that river will be calm, other days it will be wild, but it will always lead you where you need to go. When you let God guide you, you stop asking, why is this happening to me? And begin to see, this is happening for me. You stop demanding answers and start receiving wisdom. You stop worrying about outcomes and start living in trust. Surrender is the shift from anxiety to awareness, from control to connection, from fear to faith. There is freedom in saying, I do not have to know. Freedom in saying, I am not in charge of everything. Freedom in admitting, I am guided, and that is enough. The world will try to convince you that surrender is weakness, that letting go means losing control. But the truth is that you were never in control to begin with. You were managing illusions, trying to predict the unpredictable, holding on to shifting sands. When you finally surrender, you stop exhausting yourself with what you cannot change. You start hearing the whisper of divine guidance saying, be still and know that I am God. In stillness, the chaos quiets. In stillness, peace begins to return. The same peace that worry once stole begins to flow back into your being. Not because the problems have vanished, but because you have remembered that you do not face them alone. Surrender is not a single act. It is a practice, a daily returning. Each morning, you wake up and say, God, I place this day in your hands. Each night, you release what you could not finish, what you could not fix, what you could not understand. It is a rhythm of release and trust, over and over, until peace becomes your natural state. You learn that surrender is not the end of effort. It is the beginning of grace. You still act, but your actions are no longer driven by fear. You still plan, but your plans are no longer chained to anxiety. You still care, but your caring is rooted in faith, not control. Surrender does not make you passive. It makes you powerful in the most profound way, because you are no longer acting from desperation, but from divine alignment. When you surrender, you begin to see life through a wider lens. What once looked like loss begins to look like redirection. What once felt like delay begins to feel like preparation. What once seemed like punishment begins to reveal itself as protection. You begin to understand that everything unfolds in divine timing, not your timing. There is no need to rush what God is already arranging. The hands of divine order never sleep, never forget, never fail. What is meant for you cannot miss you when you trust instead of chase. You begin to walk with a quiet confidence, knowing that even in confusion, you are being led toward clarity. Even in pain, you are being shaped for purpose. Even in waiting, you are being strengthened for the blessing. Surrender lifts the invisible weight that worry adds to every thought. You can feel it when it happens. The unclenching of the mind, the softening of the heart, the deep breath that feels like your first in a long time. You begin to stand taller, not because the load is gone, but because the burden is shared. You remember that you are never carrying anything alone. God walks beside you in every step, behind you in every silence, before you in every unknown. When you surrender, you begin to sense this companionship in ways words cannot describe. You see it in small miracles, in the right words at the right time, in doors that open after long silence, in peace that arrives without explanation. That is the reward of surrender, not that life becomes perfect, but that you stop fearing its imperfections. Sometimes the most powerful prayer is not a long one. Sometimes it is just a whisper. God, I can't do this without you. And in that moment, the heavens move. The same energy that formed stars bends toward your pain and says, I am here. That is surrender. It is the recognition that you were never abandoned, never forgotten, never alone. You were only carrying what was never yours to hold. When you give it back, you make space for God to fill you again. That space becomes a sanctuary where peace lives, where purpose grows, where joy returns quietly but surely. And once you have felt that peace, you begin to crave it more than control. You begin to understand that nothing is worth losing your peace, for surrender is the art of partnership with the divine. It is the dance between doing and trusting, between acting and allowing. It is knowing when to move and when to wait, when to speak and when to listen, when to hold on and when to let go. It is an act of deep intelligence, a recognition that your wisdom is limited but God's is infinite. You do not stop living, you start living lighter. You do not stop caring, you care more deeply but without the strain. You no longer carry the world on your shoulders, you place it back where it belongs, in the hands of the one who made it. And when you do, something remarkable happens. The world begins to feel lighter. The sun feels warmer. The heart feels freer. You begin to live in alignment with life itself, no longer swimming against the current but flowing with it. And every day, in small ways, surrender teaches you to trust again. It teaches you that life is not happening to you but through you. It teaches you that letting go is not loss, but liberation. It teaches you that faith is not blindness. It is sight from a higher vantage. You start to see that the moments you once called breakdowns were breakthroughs in disguise, that the unanswered prayers were redirections towards something better, that the closed doors were divine detours leading you home. Each act of surrender becomes a sacred exchange. You give God your worry, and He gives you His peace. You give Him your fear, and He gives you courage. You give Him your confusion, and He gives you clarity. And in that exchange, the heavy becomes light, the burdened heart becomes buoyant, the restless soul becomes still. Faith is the quiet flame that refuses to die, even when the wind howls through the corridors of our hearts. It begins small, almost invisible, a flicker in the dark when every other light has gone out. Fear surrounds it, whispering that the darkness will win, that the storm will last forever, that the morning will not come. But faith, even in its smallest form, holds a power that fear cannot match. It is the whisper that says, "Keep walking." It is the strength that rises not because the path is clear, but because the soul knows that clarity will come with every step forward. Faith does not wait for evidence, it becomes the evidence. It does not ask the mountain to move before believing, it believes, and the mountain begins to shift. Fear freezes the body and chains the mind, but faith melts those chains and turns paralysis into motion. Every life knows the voice of fear. It speaks many languages, wears many faces. It tells you that you are not enough, that you are too late, that you have failed before and will fail again. It shows you the size of the mountain and hides from you the strength of your legs. Fear's power lies in its disguise. It feels like wisdom, like caution, like reason. But underneath it is doubt. It is the quiet denial of the possibility of grace. Faith is the answer, not because it erases fear, but because it transforms it. It takes the same energy that fear uses to imagine failure and uses it to imagine victory. It turns the trembling of the heart into the rhythm of determination. Where fear says stop, faith says step. Where fear says what if, faith says even if. Fear builds walls around dreams, faith builds doors through them. Courage is not born in the absence of fear. Courage is born in its presence. You cannot be brave until you have trembled. You cannot rise until you have fallen. Faith does not pretend that the darkness does not exist. It simply refuses to let darkness have the final word. The person of faith walks into the unknown not because the path is safe, but because the purpose is sure. They hear the same thunder as everyone else, but they listen for the whisper beneath it that says, "Be still, I am with you." Faith takes that whisper and holds it close until it becomes louder than the storm. It becomes the song that guides you through chaos, the light that turns confusion into direction. Every act of courage you have ever taken began with faith. Before the first word was spoken, before the first step was made, before the first dream was chased, faith said yes where fear said no. There is a moment, quiet and sacred, when the mind is still arguing and the heart decides. That is the moment faith is born. The mind lists the risks, the heart remembers the calling. The mind calculates the loss, the heart envisions the purpose. Faith sides with the heart. It does not ignore logic, it transcends it. It is not foolishness, it is higher reasoning. It believes that there is something greater than human understanding, orchestrating events beyond sight. When you begin to live from that knowing, fear loses its grip. You still feel it, but it no longer controls your direction. You begin to walk with a different rhythm, one that does not depend on certainty, but on trust. You become the evidence of what belief can build, the living proof that courage is not the absence of trembling hands, but the decision to move them anyway. Faith and fear cannot occupy the same throne. One must serve the other. When fear rules, life contracts. Possibility becomes narrow. Every choice becomes a calculation of loss. But when faith reigns, the heart expands. The eyes see opportunity where before there was only danger. The voice that once shook with doubt begins to speak with conviction. The same world looks different because faith changes the lens through which you see it. Two people can face the same challenge. One sees defeat, the other sees destiny. The difference is faith. Fear counts the obstacles. Faith counts the reasons to try. Fear asks, what if I fall? Faith answers, what if you fly? Faith turns inward pain into outward power. Many of the world's greatest transformations began with someone who refused to let fear dictate their fate. The child who dared to dream beyond their circumstances, the mother who prayed when there was no food left, the man who forgave when anger would have been easier. All were acts of faith. Each one said, I will act as if the miracle is already on its way. And in doing so, they invited that miracle to find them. Faith is magnetic. It draws to you the strength and opportunities that fear keeps away. Fear isolates you from life. Faith connects you to it. When you believe that something greater is guiding you, you begin to notice guidance everywhere, in coincidences, in conversations, in the soft pull of intuition that leads you where logic would never dare. There is a kind of courage that looks quiet from the outside, but shakes the heavens on the inside. It is the courage of the one who wakes up each morning and tries again after failing yesterday. It is the courage of the one who forgives when bitterness feels justified. It is the courage of the one who shows up even when they are afraid of not being enough. That courage is born of faith. It is not loud. It is steady. It keeps moving, one breath, one step, one prayer at a time. Fear thrives in the future. It feeds on what might happen. Faith lives in the now. It grounds you in this moment and reminds you that right now you have enough. Right now, you are enough. Right now, you are guided. The future will unfold as it must. But this moment is where strength begins. Faith transforms fear by teaching you that you are not the source of your own power. You are the vessel. The power flows through you, not from you. When you realize that, you stop being afraid of your own limitations. You stop measuring your worth by your ability to control outcomes. You start to see that courage is not about confidence, it is about connection. To the divine, to purpose, to the deep knowing that even if you stumble, you are being held. The hands that shape the stars hold you too. And once you know that, truly know it, fear begins to dissolve like mist in morning light. Fear always begins with the question, what if I fail? Faith answers, what if failure is the path to something greater? Fear sees an ending. Faith sees a beginning hidden inside it. Fear tells you to protect your heart. Faith tells you to use it. Fear warns you to wait until you're ready. Faith reminds you that readiness comes through doing. Every act of faith is a seed planted in uncertainty, and every harvest of courage grows from that soil. You don't wait for fear to disappear before you act. You act, and fear begins to fade. Because fear cannot survive where movement lives. Action fueled by faith burns away hesitation. It doesn't mean you will never be afraid again. It means fear no longer gets the final vote. The world around you may still look the same after you choose faith, but the world within you changes entirely. Your thoughts take on a new rhythm. Your heart beats steadier. You begin to carry yourself with quiet authority, as though you know something others cannot yet see. That knowledge is not arrogance. It is trust. Trust that the invisible is working in your favor. Trust that the path unfolding beneath your feet is sacred even when it feels uncertain. Faith gives you eyes to see potential where others see problems. It gives you strength to speak truth when silence would be safer. It gives you the resilience to rise again when life knocks you down. Every time you rise, fear loses ground. Every time you speak light in the presence of darkness, courage grows wings. Faith also transforms fear into compassion. When you have walked through the valley of doubt and come out on the other side, you no longer judge the fear in others. You understand it. You see how fragile the human heart can be, how easy it is to forget your own strength. So you begin to lift others, to share your light, to tell your story. Your courage becomes their map. Your faith becomes their mirror. The ripple of one person's faith can calm the fears of many. That is how movements are born, how communities heal, how love becomes stronger than division. Faith is not a private possession. It is a living force meant to be shared. Each time you encourage someone to believe, you multiply faith in the world. And every multiplied faith pushes fear further into the shadows. Sometimes faith will call you to act without knowing how it will all work out. It will ask you to step when there is no visible ground. It will ask you to speak when your voice shakes. It will ask you to dream again after disappointment. And every time you say yes, you strengthen the bridge between fear and courage. That bridge is built plank by plank, choice by choice. The more you cross it, the more stable it becomes. Until one day, you realize that fear still exists, but it no longer rules. It may knock on your door, but it no longer lives in your home. Faith has taken residence there instead, filling every corner with light. Faith is not a possession you keep, it is a muscle you build. The more you use it, the stronger it becomes. Every trial, every setback, every unanswered prayer is an opportunity to exercise it. Fear will tell you to give up. Faith will tell you to grow up, to rise into the version of yourself that was always waiting. You will learn that courage is not loud triumph, but quiet persistence. You will learn that action born from faith has a rhythm all its own, graceful yet powerful, gentle yet unstoppable. You will begin to notice how the universe bends toward the faithful. Doors open, timing aligns, help arrives, and when it does, you realize that faith did not just move mountains outside of you. It moved the mountain within you. The transformation from fear to courage is a sacred alchemy. It takes the heaviness of dread and turns it into the gold of determination. It takes trembling and turns it into testimony. It takes doubt and turns it into direction. Every time you trust, even a little, you participate in that alchemy. You become a living flame that lights the path for others still lost in fear. And though storms may come, your flame will not go out. Because faith, once awakened, becomes self-sustaining. It draws its strength from the same source that lights the stars and calms the seas. It becomes not just what you believe in, but what you are trusting God opens the door to joy, clarity, and freedom. It is one of the deepest invitations of the human soul, one that asks us to release our tight grip on the things we cannot control and to rest our trembling hands in the divine. When you truly trust God, life begins to shift in ways that logic cannot explain. You start to breathe differently. You start to see differently. The heaviness that once pressed down on your shoulders begins to lift, not because the circumstances have changed, but because your heart has. Trusting God is not a moment of weakness. It is a declaration of strength. It is the soul standing tall in the middle of uncertainty and saying, "I may not understand, but I will not be undone." It is the realization that joy is not found in having everything figured out, but in knowing who holds everything together. There are seasons in life when confusion wraps itself around us like fog, when every path seems blocked, when prayers feel unanswered and time feels cruel. In those moments, the mind screams for clarity, the heart aches for freedom, and the spirit longs for peace. And then, in a whisper softer than the world's noise, comes the reminder: trust. Trust that even when you cannot trace God's hand, you can trust His heart. Trust that the silence is not absence, but preparation. Trust that the waiting is not punishment, but positioning. When you surrender to that truth, joy begins to return. Not the fragile joy that depends on things going right, but the sturdy joy that survives the storm. That kind of joy does not come from circumstances, it flows from connection. It is born when you release the illusion of control and rest in divine order. Freedom comes not from control, but from surrender. The more you try to hold life in your hands, the more it slips through your fingers. But when you release it to God, you find that what you give up was never truly yours to begin with. Trusting God is the art of letting go without losing hope. It is waking up each morning and saying, "I will do my part, and I will let God do His." That trust turns chaos into calm, confusion into clarity, and fear into faith. When you stop trying to make everything make sense, you create room for miracles to move. You begin to understand that the same God who painted sunsets and balances oceans can surely handle the details of your life. That understanding opens a door that leads out of worry and into wonder, out of anxiety and into assurance, out of striving and into serenity. When you trust God, clarity comes like sunlight through clouds. It doesn't always arrive in full brightness. Sometimes it comes in gentle rays that light only the next step. But that light is enough. It guides you one decision at a time, one breath at a time. The anxious need to know the whole path begins to fade. You no longer demand answers before acting, because you know the one who leads you cannot mislead you. You start to notice how each delay carries a lesson, how each detour hides a blessing. You begin to see that what you once called rejection was often redirection. What you thought was loss was often liberation. Trust sharpens your sight until even your tears reflect light. You learn to bless the waiting seasons because they teach you patience, and to bless the closed doors because they save you from wrong turns. In trusting, you begin to see that life is not against you. It is for you, molding you into someone capable of holding what you prayed for. Joy enters quietly when trust takes root. It doesn't shout, it hums. It sits with you in the morning light, reminding you that today is a gift, that breath itself is proof of divine mercy. Trusting God teaches you to stop chasing joy and start noticing it. You find it in small moments, in laughter, in stillness, in forgiveness, in the peace that comes from knowing you don't have to figure everything out. The joy that comes from trust is not temporary. It is anchored. It is joy that dances even when the music changes, joy that smiles even through tears, joy that sees beyond what is and rests in what will be. This is the joy that makes you unshakable, the joy that no storm can steal, because its roots are not in circumstance, but in faith. Clarity, too, is a gift of trust. When you stop leaning on your own understanding and start leaning on divine wisdom, you begin to perceive life differently. You stop seeing problems as punishments and start seeing them as invitations to grow. You stop asking, "Why me?" and begin asking, "What am I being shown?" Trust transforms confusion into curiosity. It teaches you to listen, to wait, to sense rather than force. And in that stillness, understanding unfolds. The path that once looked like chaos begins to make sense in hindsight, and you marvel at how every twist had purpose. Trusting God gives you the vision to see that His timing is always right, even when it feels late, and His ways are always higher, even when they seem hard. That vision clears the fog of fear and replaces it with the light of peace. Freedom arrives as the final fragrance of trust. When you no longer carry the need to control outcomes, you are free. When you stop worrying about how others see you and start living for how God sees you, you are free. When you stop measuring your worth by your wins and rest it in His love, you are free. True freedom is not the ability to do whatever you want. It is the peace of knowing that you are exactly where you're meant to be. It is the release of anxiety over tomorrow because you know that tomorrow already belongs to God. It is the quiet courage to show up today with faith, to give your best, and to leave the rest in divine hands. That freedom is not loud. It is serene. It is the deep breath after surrender, the exhale of years of holding on. It is the soul standing open, unguarded, trusting, and free. Many people believe that trust means weakness, but it is the opposite. To trust God is to declare that you believe in something stronger than yourself. It takes courage to let go of control, to open your palms when the world teaches you to clench your fists. It takes strength to say, "I don't know, but I believe." Every act of trust is an act of courage. Each time you release your fear and place it in divine hands, you build spiritual muscle. You become lighter, stronger, steadier. You learn to navigate storms not by fighting the wind, but by adjusting your sails. You start to see that what once frightened you now refines you. What once felt unbearable now becomes a blessing in disguise. Trusting God does not mean you stop feeling afraid. It means you stop being ruled by fear. It means you start living by faith instead of by sight. Trust invites peace into the heart. It quiets the noise of comparison, the rush of perfectionism, the hunger for validation. It tells you that you are already enough, already loved, already seen. You stop striving to prove yourself and start living from the truth that you are held. When you live from that space, everything changes. You work differently, love differently, speak differently. You stop reacting to life and start responding with grace. The smallest acts become sacred, each choice guided, each moment infused with purpose. You begin to see that the same God who designed galaxies also designed you with care, and that every breath you take is evidence of His faithfulness. There are moments in life that test your trust deeply. The diagnosis that shakes your faith, the loss that feels unbearable, the silence after desperate prayers. Those moments do not mean God has forgotten you. They are the moments that forge deeper trust. Trust is not built in comfort. It is built in the fire. It is in those moments that your faith learns to breathe underwater, that your hope learns to sing in the dark. Each time you refuse to give up, each time you choose to believe when nothing makes sense, trust grows roots. And when it grows deep, no storm can uproot it. You learn to walk through fire and come out shining, to move through valleys and still praise, to face uncertainty and still rest, trusting God aligns your spirit with divine rhythm. You stop rushing ahead of time and start flowing with it. You realize that what is meant for you cannot miss you, and what misses you was never meant for you. You begin to trust the timing of your life, to understand that delays are not denials but designs. The universe begins to respond differently to you because your energy changes. Instead of fear, you carry faith. Instead of panic, you carry patience. And that energy attracts clarity, opportunities, peace. You begin to move like someone who knows they are guided. You stop forcing doors to open and start knocking gently, knowing the right ones will swing wide in their own season. That rhythm creates a harmony between you and life. And in that harmony, freedom blooms, joy, clarity, and freedom are not distant rewards for the faithful. They are the natural fruits of trust. They grow in the soil of surrender, watered by patience and sunlighted by faith. When you learn to trust, you begin to live lighter. You laugh more easily, forgive more quickly, love more deeply. You stop trying to predict the future and start participating in the present. You begin to see divine fingerprints everywhere, in timing, in lessons, in second chances. Trust transforms ordinary days into sacred experiences. It opens your eyes to beauty you once overlooked, teaches you to rest when you would have run, and to believe when you would have broken. There is an ease that comes from trusting God that no achievement can give. It is the ease of knowing that you do not walk alone, that even your missteps are woven into mercy. It is the peace of realizing that your story is already known from beginning to end, and it ends in grace. When you live with that trust, you stop fighting the flow of life and start dancing with it. Every moment becomes a conversation with the divine. Every challenge becomes a canvas for faith. Every victory becomes an offering of gratitude. And in that space, joy expands, clarity sharpens, and freedom takes flight. Trusting God opens the unseen gates of the heart. It teaches you that the same love that created you is still guiding you, that every closed door, every unanswered prayer, every unexpected turn is shaping you for something greater. You learn to stop asking for a life without storms and start asking for faith that stands steady in them. You learn to rest in the truth that everything is unfolding exactly as it should. You learn that peace is not the absence of trouble, but the presence of trust. You learn to let go, to breathe, to believe, to live free in the rhythm of grace, where joy flows without effort, clarity rises without force, and freedom becomes the natural language of your soul.